Hello and welcome to The Promised Land, a show about Manchester United and part of the 90 Min podcast network. I'm Scott Saunders, joined by Rob Blanchette. As ever, Rob, bad things are happening. And we're talking about on the pitch now, or, well, off the pitch. Injuries are happening. And United play Nottingham Forest on Saturday. And it seems like everything they've been working on in pre-season, we're going to talk in this show today about how United get around the injuries that they have, because Mason Mount is injured, Luke Shaw is injured, and we're going to talk about what the hell do United do about this. Rob, how are you doing?
Not too bad, but like everyone else, obviously exasperated to hear the news of injuries. We did say, Scott, only a few weeks ago that even though Manchester United squad was relatively balanced, if you did your business, selling players, buying in 1, 2, 3 more, that you'd be kind of all right if you got some injuries. But if you did get those injuries without doing that business, guess what? You might be in trouble. So yes, Luke Shaw injured, Mason Mount injured, and other players still recovering in the squad. So a difficult period for Ten Hag now. And I think now this manager is going to have a leap of faith with some of the younger players and throw them in the deep end.
Well, we'll talk about this because Rob and I have differing views on that. But I'll list the injuries that United have. Rasmus Højlund. There was talk that he could be back on Saturday early this week on the bench. I don't think that's going to happen. Good few more weeks yet. It's barely training, really. Victor Lindelof confirmed as much. Terrell Malacia, muscle injury. Rasmus Højlund, back injury. Ahmad, knee injury. Kobe Manu, ankle injury. Tom Heaton, calf injury. Mason Mount, hamstring injury. And Luke Shaw now has a muscular injury, which they're talking... United are hopeful that it's weeks rather than months, was the line that came out on Thursday night. We await. We're recording this before Erik Ten Hag's press conference, so maybe he will give more information. But as it stands, those players I just listed, United are going to be without for a while. So, 2 games into the season, Rob, how?
Well, football's always just generally a delicate ecosystem, especially when it comes to injuries. And there's no doubt that when you come through pre-season, sometimes players respond well. You get the minutes in you, you get legs on you, you feel better, you want to be where you are. But there was a feeling, I think, Scott, especially the preseason games we saw and one we attended, you looked at the team, it didn't feel like that. It didn't feel like United were moving through the gears to get fit. It felt all a little bit stagnant. I'm not surprised at all we're seeing these muscle injuries and things that are coming up now, just as they are. And these things are like buses, isn't it? They come in fives. They don't come one at a time. And I think when you look at Man United, there's no doubt, I think the manager wants to play something that's more of a high energy style of football, which we saw at times last year. And guess what happened, Scott? Players got injured, didn't they? And then you had to kind of revise what you were doing. You lost Christian Eriksen, obviously, in that period as well. And that was a big blow at the time. Now, you might have to go back to Christian Eriksen. And I think you might have to go the other way tactically and not play a high press to what they've been doing in the last few weeks.
Well, I'm not sure I'll be the only person to say this if I was asked the question, but I would actually prefer the way that United were playing last season with Christian Eriksen in the midfield than what we've seen so far this season. And I know that they're trying something different, or they have been trying something different, and it will take time to work itself out. But for me, like we've spoken on previous shows about United being so open through the middle of the pitch and easy to play against, they still are with Eriksen in there because he doesn't really have the legs, but at least what Eriksen does do is sit a bit deeper and you get a little bit more quality in possession.
Completely.
Which may benefit United, but it is taking a step back from what Ten Hag was trying to do in pre-season and in the first couple of games of this season to the back end of last season when Christian Eriksen returned. And we know, I don't think Christian Eriksen really played that well towards the back end of last season, but he has had, he's had time to get fit. He's had time to, he's been sat on the bench for the first 2 games. Come on. And we know what Christian Eriksen can do, right?
Yeah, totally. And you're right. I think at the end of last season, when Eriksen came back from his injury, I think both him and Casemiro, after Casemiro's, multiple game ban and came back from that period, neither of them were in the hottest shape. And we didn't feel that either in pre-season. Now you've got no choice. Now you're going to have to try and do something a little bit more pragmatic. I understand why Ten Hag has been trying to get this philosophy into the players to play higher up the pitch, play with more energy, and push. Because the further you are up there, the easier it is back there. That's the truth. That's the way it should be. But what have we seen with Man United in the last few weeks, Scott? And that is that hasn't actually been the case. Big chasm in midfield, players walking through it, and United, I think, conceding more shots in these first 2 games than ever in their history in terms of their defending. Now, that hasn't always translated into goals, but it's worrying, isn't it? And I think now you're seeing that the players are responding in terms of these injuries, that they're playing a more energetic style, and it's hurting them. So you have to kind of dial it back a little bit. And when it works, it's great. And you're like Liverpool playing 4-3-3 high press and winning titles. And guess what, Scott? When you get injuries and it's not working,
One title
and Champions League. Yeah, so not bad. Better than Man United in recent years. But when it works, it's great and it's very delicate. But when it breaks and you get injuries, guess what? You end up 3rd, 4th, 5th, or 6th. So United are in that place, I think, balance-wise, where they're either going to stumble on something that really works well and they can carry on with that for the season. But I'm not quite sure United are in that place at the moment, Scott, in terms of their physicality. You need to work with it slowly and get there, but also buy players that help you do that style of football.
How can you buy players with no money? That is a question we should be asking. I had a few conversations this week, and it's how have United got to a position where they don't have any money? Manchester United,
because of their owners.
Well, we know that, but it's just like when you take a step back and you think, wow, this club I knew now don't have any money to spend on any players.
United were always really good at cash reserves, keeping cash reserves just in case, always. And what's happened, Scott, in the last 5 to 6, 7 years is that they've kind of chipped into the cash reserve to the point where there's now none. And United are kind of operating everything on, tabs. Like, oh, we'll pay you that there and then. Now, that is happening a lot in football. It's not just Man United. But it's not a case they haven't got money to buy players, Scott. It's just they're not doing their business correctly. Sell the players that you got and move that money on and do it all swiftly, do it quicker. And the thing is, United is they sit on their hands and then they get a few injuries and then they go, oh no, this has happened. We just didn't realise that players might get injured. Bang, 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 bang. Harry Maguire, are you fit? Are you ready? So this is the problem, isn't it? That's what United is. They are just too slow, too stagnant. And we know the manager wants rid of some of these players and new players coming in. So it's difficult, I think, for him because now he's going to have to pull a rabbit out of the hat and do some kind of magic show in the next few weeks.
I can imagine Erik Ten Hag's quite frustrated, really, that he's not able to, he's been here just over 12 months, 14, 16 months, or however long it's been now. And even now, he still can't do what he wants with the team that he's got. I know that, but the thing is, he's bought enough players in his own image and profile to give people armor to suggest this is your team now. So
yeah, there's a sweet spot.
Is it his team now?
It is his team now. He's been there 12 months, and United spent what, 250 million in the window. Spent quite a lot in the other window.
Window, I think it's sub 200.
So it's sub 200. But as we said, it was only a few weeks ago. We were going, this is a good start to window.
But it was.
It was, exactly. And I think United think like that, Scott. They go, oh, well, that was all right, wasn't it? And now we'll go to pre-season and we'll just do it nice and slowly. Now, we have both preached on this show that doing it methodically is probably the right way to do it in business terms and in football terms. But you've also got to have contingency planning. You have to look at these things and think, what if we get injuries? So that's why you need a better squad. And that is why, I know we disagree on this and we will have this conversation. This is why you need to blood kids and get kids ready, because there's every chance in a squad situation that you have to use the actual squad. You don't get to use 11 players and think that is it and that you don't use the rest of it. Every team goes through that process at some point. City might have to play Cole Palmer at some point, but Cole Palmer would walk into our team and looks at Man City and is one of their subs. So you have to improve.
Well, they just signed Jeremy Doku now as well.
Well, they've signed Doku, exactly, and who's a specialist, and they need a specialist to do something. So they're bringing him in, and that's what he'll do. And that's good. That's how you plan. But United haven't really got those specialists. Everyone's a kind of broad palette, isn't it, of what they can and can't do. And now you've lost Luke Shaw, who was your cover at both left centre-back last year and plays your left-back position. Guess what? You might need some more players. So somehow United need to go into the market and buy players, or you might see, Scott, some elaborate loan signings, I think, in the last week.
I would think the elaborate loan signing route is one that they will explore. United have done a statement. United defender Luke Shaw sustained an injury, which will rule him out of forthcoming games. The muscle issue is still being assessed, but the England left back is expected to be out of action for a number of weeks. And the statement goes on, etc., but doesn't really say much else worth noting here. So we'll take this angle with it. What do United do about this? Because obviously, I think we've alluded to already that the system or the plan might have to change.
Yeah.
In terms of personnel, what would be? Do you think Ten Hag will move to a different first choice 11 and stick with that for a couple of game weeks, or will he go? I'll use this for Forest and I'll use this for Arsenal because they are the two games coming up before the international break.
I think he's going to have to feel around a little bit because these are not really in the immediate plans. Now, again, I'm not going to insult Erik Ten Hag and say he hasn't got contingencies for his football tactics and what he wants to do. The thing I didn't like in pre-season, Scott, is that the minutes were not really mixed and matched. It was a very much like, this is my first team and these are kind of everyone else. And the way I like to see managers do it, and again, I'm not saying I'm better than Erik Ten Hag, I've got to keep saying that because it comes up in the comments, is that I like to see talent blooded with talent. So you go, right, this is what I would like to happen at left back. But, if this player's out, this player's played with these players, they know what they're doing. And I think that there is this chasm between maybe the first 11 at Man United and say the next 11. But they're not two separate teams, Scott, are they? They're supposed to be one team. They're supposed to be able to function together. And I think Ten Hag now, I think with these two injuries, there's no doubt Mount and Shaw are bona fide de facto starters. They would start pretty much every game or be close to it in Erik Ten Hag's mind. So what do you do? I think with Luke Shaw, we think Delo obviously will play that side. Did Delo play there in pre-season, Scott? No. Didn't play there hardly once.
Well, you had Malacia. Well,
Delo
can play there. I mean, he has played there. He played there last season. Scored at Forest, playing from left back, if I remember rightly.
Delo can play there. Delo can play there. Like I can juggle 3 oranges, but I might drop them. So, like Delo is.
Well, you were also critical of Delo at right back. So
I don't want to see Delo at left or right back first and foremost. But you've got it needs must, isn't it? You are stuck there. He's not a specialist, and he will play. Like you're going to have to play him because he is again in that realm of starter, isn't he? Like Wan-Bissaka's probably claimed that right hand side. I think on the left hand side, you've got to bring him in, haven't you? Now you've got really no choice. You've got a kid in Alvaro, or you've got Delo. So you're going to have to go with Delo. But what I'm saying, Scott, is we didn't see any of this working in pre-season. All the games they played, they didn't try these things. It all just felt a little bit soft. Didn't see players playing minutes in alternative roles. It was all just like, well, this is what we do. And if we get injuries, well, we'll just do something else. I don't know. I don't like that. You're going to get stuck with Delo now. Delo has to play there. And I don't think he's a very good left back. Like, do you?
Well, Luke Shaw couldn't deal with Bukayo Saka last season. I know Arsenal are the game next Sunday. But would you feel confident putting either Alvaro Fernandez or Diogo Delo up against Bukayo Saka? I suppose Delo's never been the best defender in the world, but at least he is right-footed, so we would tend to come into that side that Saka likes to cut into. But yeah, it doesn't strike you with confidence, does it, ahead of that game? I mean, we're going into the Arsenal game next weekend. Two teams who are on massively different feelings around each team at the moment. So, how do you think, what will Ten Hag do on Saturday against Forest, do you think?
Well, he's going to have to test a load of things against Forest. Like, this is a team coming to Manchester United where you expect that they might be in the bottom half of the division and they might have less quality players, certainly compared to Arsenal. But you've got to kind of stumble on something very, very quickly, haven't you? So like Delo could come in, Scott, and play really well against Forest because they're Forest. Yeah. And then you go up against Saka and you get absolutely murdered. So do I trust Delo's defensive skills at right back? No. So am I going to trust his skills at left back? Absolutely not. I do think it will help that obviously being right-footed, he can invert, and that means you can kind of bodge the system. So he can come into midfield and maybe do that work, and you can spread out across the back and maybe tuck Wan-Bissaka in. But now you're trying things, Scott, that again are on the fly. This is like we've not seen anything from Manchester United in the last 6 weeks that suggest they've got a plan B. I've just done a video called 10 Things Wrong with Manchester United. Yes, I'm plugging one of my own videos there. And one of the things that I said was exactly that, is that it seems that United want to play one way, but there is literally no plan B. We've not seen it in pre-season, and we didn't see it in the first 2 games where United could just switch to do different things. And yes, that's a development thing, but now United are going to have to develop quickly, aren't they? They haven't really got a choice because you've lost 2 of your first teamers. And I think Luke Shaw, even though he's not played well at the start of this season and didn't look great in pre-season, he's fundamental to what you do. A left-footed, left-sided player who can overlap and get you up the pitch. Who does that now, Scott? Like, yeah, Dalot can do it, but he's right-footed. So he's not going to be able to overlap. So that's a big tactic just out of Ten Hag's book.
I would say his left foot isn't terrible. It's not. There are some very one-footed players. I think what he was brought in because I remember at the time he was signed because he could play both sides.
That's right, absolutely. And he hasn't done it, and no manager has trusted him to do it. So there we go. So, like, you have to do it now because you've got no choice. And you didn't, like we all said, you probably don't need a left back if Luke Shaw stays fit, but then you need to push on someone like Alvaro to be his deputy and keep him, or maybe put him on loan and bring him back and work the position. You're lucky that on the right-sided, you had Wan-Bissaka, who came out of nowhere and really formed, like, you know, in terms of his work, he's done really, really well. But then now what if you get an injury to your right back? Who do you bring in? Well, you know, you let Ethan Laird go and went, well, that player's gone out the door. I understand why the manager's doing those things, making those moves. He's trying to clear the squad out, but the squad hasn't been cleared, I think, in the right way. And it means you've not been able to purchase in the right way. United, I think, are going to have to go into the market. Do not be surprised in the next 7 days that Man United go out and discover a left back who suddenly appears at the football club. Because I don't think Erik Ten Hag sitting there going, I really trust, you know, Jacob Dalot to play left back for me. Like, he's
I'm spitballing here. What if Dalot played right back and you switched Aaron Wan-Bissaka to left back for the Arsenal game?
Same problem.
Better defender.
Better defender on FIFA, like you know.
Like, come on, Rob. He's a better defender than Dalot is.
He's a better defender
Rob,
as a human being. All right, he's a better defender as a human being, but he cannot play on the left hand side, Scott. He will get killed.
Well, they're going to have
know
to
it. A footballer once said to me,
just asking a question.
All right, a footballer once said to me, right, about playing when you change positions. And he was saying that when you play on the right-hand side, if you go to the left, he said sometimes it looks like a completely different game. Now, we live in an era where right-footed players are playing on the left because they invert, and that's what's going on, and that's what managers are pushing. Luke Shaw is not that kind of player. Does invert, but is a left-footed player and overlaps. And that's United's tactics. So they don't have another tactic there.
It hasn't been at the start of this season. I think that we've seen that Luke Shaw hasn't really, especially in the first game, he was tucking in a lot.
They will tuck in because fullbacks tuck in, but if you go and look at the stats as well, Luke Shaw was overlapping Garnacho non-stop. Every time Garnacho got the ball, he would pull up and Luke Shaw would come around the back. So that's the tactic. Doesn't mean they've been doing it loads or that, so it works. And now the tactic has to change. I don't think Dalot can really do that. Better with his left foot probably than Wan-Bissaka. So you're going to think about that. But Aaron Wan-Bissaka, as far as I'm aware, has never played on the left side of a football pitch in his life.
I've definitely saw him do it last season.
Really? At left back?
Yeah, like for a period in a game. Yeah.
It can only have been for 5 minutes. Like unless
I was not suggesting Rob. I was not suggesting let's do it. I was just saying, how do you deal with Saka with what you've got? That's all I was saying. Anyway.
Well, how about you use the 18-year-old left back? Yeah, who is actually left back.
Let's talk about this because do you have more confidence that an 18-year-old left back you can chuck him in and deal with Bukayo Saka? Because for me, like Rob, we've had this conversation even last season. And I know you're a big advocate of throwing in youth players, but you look at all the youth players that have left the club this season, the standard of club that they've gone and joined.
Yeah.
And then you have to ask yourself, these players are not getting a chance because they're not good enough. It's because there's a reason for it. Brandon Williams has joined Ipswich. You know, I know he's been on the fringes.
Yeah. He's not young player.
Charlie Savage, was he gone? Forest Green?
Bristol. I think the thing is when you look at the players, you're totally right. If they're going to go and start their careers and reboot their careers, you're going to have to drop down the divisions. That's just what it is. You know, I'm not saying for 1 second that this is like your future star. Like, I think this is the problem we talk about youth in the squad, is that everyone wants that young player to be your future superstar. They're going to do this and they're going to do it forever, and they're going to be a £100 million footballer, and that's the way it works. It's not how it works, Scott. You have to go down the food chain sometimes to be able to make things work. Do I prefer an 18-year-old left back who knows the position back to front and has played it since he's 12 years old and doing it, to someone who can do left back but doesn't do it every week, doesn't think about it, has no idea about it in terms of the squad setup, and has to do it because of an injury? And when Luke Shaw went from left back to centre back, Scott, what did everyone say? What's going on here? Why is this player who's never played centre back playing centre back? And do you know what? Proved everyone wrong. Did all right, didn't he, at centre back? And we were all quite happy with that. But I still have that overriding feeling inside. I don't want to see Luke Shaw at centre back. Just don't. He's a left-sided player, and that's where you are with him. And when you talk about replacements, I want people who are specialists there and can do it, or at least someone who's got the diversity to do it with a rounded skill set. And like you just said there, Aaron Wan-Bissaka is a better defender than Jega Dalot. And the reason why Dalot isn't in the team, Scott, is because he can't defend. So you're going to put him up against Saka, he's dead. It's finished. I would go with the kid and say to the kid, go and give it a go.
Whatever you do, even Luke Shaw couldn't deal with him last season.
Yeah. Do you know what? I can write the content now. I'm going to the game on Saturday and Nottingham Forest, and you'll make the changes, and you have to make them because you've got no choices. And then say, if Alanga goes and murders one of our fullbacks, the whole content will be us going, oh, look, here's a player that we let go who we didn't want because we didn't want him, and that was the right thing to do. And he's just murdered one of your first choice fullbacks. And that is going to be the content we talk about. I don't want to do that. I'd rather give a kid a chance and say, they're due mistakes. They don't make mistakes. You say you learn from it and you move on and you move forward. I don't think Dalot gives you anything on the left at all, but he will start there. I'm not saying he won't. And I think that's the problem in midfield now. Christian Eriksen's coming back in. And I've seen so many people say in the last few weeks, Christian Eriksen's finished. Now, I don't believe he is. I think he's still a player. I think that he can give you control in 6-8. I think he can help Casemiro if they both work together a little bit more. But, is Christian Eriksen your energy person that you want in there? No, but you're going to have to do it because he's experienced. But Kobe Manu will come back eventually and will probably be that player trusted to do that. Why do we trust Kobe more than another youngster? He can still make sense because he's better, not necessarily. Not necessarily. I know I used the same example. People said 12 months ago, Garnacho wasn't good enough, couldn't play on the left, couldn't do it. And we're actually seeing now that he probably shouldn't be starting because he hasn't got the acumen behind him doing the space work, making sure he covers people. So that's all I'm saying. I know you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't, but you've also got to look at this in a pragmatist sense about players and their positions. And if you move players around, you play Marcus Rashford at number 9, he is going to be bad. Just simple. He might score a goal or run someone, but he's not going to be good because it's not his role. So players have to play their position, and you've got to try and find out whether it's a young player or a more senior player.
Well, you're saying players have got to play their position, but Ten Hag has not shown really over the course of his year in charge that he's prepared to play players in their position. He's talking Marcus Rashford, you just mentioned there, starting striker when he's a left-sided player. Yeah. You got Christian Eriksen, who's been fit into a deep line midfield role when he's a 10 or a right winger, or an advanced right playmaker. Same thing with Mason Mount, really. And none of these guys are specialists, really, in the positions. I think Ten Hag is trying to fit square pegs in round holes a lot of times. I'm sure you'll do the same with Dalot on Saturday, but not just spitballing some other suggestions. But let us know in the comments what you think. Should United go with... I'm very much in the camp of, I believe United know that certain youngsters have the potential to actually go far, and they don't use the ones that they sell because they know that they're not good enough.
Then don't take them on pre-season. Just get rid of them. Get them out the door. And this is the problem, is that if you're building a squad... I totally agree with what you're saying, Scott. Don't think for 1 second I'm disagreeing with you. But I do think when you're looking at one position in one unique situation, which is that Man United have just lost their first choice left back, you have to consider 2, 3, 4 things and not just go with what looks like the most obvious choice, which is, well, he's the senior player, so he has to play. Because I think that's a mistake at Man United. And I use the Cole Palmer thing because Cole Palmer, I think 12 months ago, would have stepped into most Premier League teams, but sits on Man City's bench and still might leave the football club, I think, towards the end now, especially as they've just bought Doku. But you have that quality and you kind of sit on it and develop it within the house. But if you don't want those players, then you do move them out. Like you do it. Don't take them on pre-season and just fill the numbers. But get rid of them. Bring in players that are going to work for you and going to be in your squad. And you need a squad of at least 18 first-teamers. Yeah, it's money as well, but it's not new, Scott. Like this goes back to when Man United had money. Like Man United still spent more money than any team in the history of the last 10 years, even Chelsea. So like we talk about that, and it's about how you do your work, your business, and the football project. So now you're stung because you've just lost 2 first-team players. That's all it is, 2. And we're going, injury crisis, you've lost 2, but you can't handle it. That's not a good situation, is it? And I said last week, what if you lose Varane? Then you're bringing Maguire back, aren't you? You're bringing in Lindelof. So I think this is United have been a bit precarious. Do I blame Ten Hag? To an extent, because like he has to control these things. But he has to find ways. Like, why are we not playing a different system, Scott? Why don't we go to 3 at the back? That's what my football brain tells me. Play 3 at the back.
Has Ten Hag ever played 3 at the back?
Never. So this is on him.
It's the same thing then.
Play 3 at the back. Play 5 in your midfield. Keep the wide players. You be able to drop into shape a little bit more, and then you're going to have to. Then Rashford's got someone up top to do some work with him. But if you don't do anything like that, then you can't really just try it in a Premier League game, can you? Like Forest, you're going to have to play your system with either a kid who's been learning the system or a senior player that's not very good in that position. That's kind of where you are now at the moment.
Yeah, I think Ten Hag has a philosophy he ultimately wants to play.
Yeah.
And United's market activity really can't support that to the fullest extent. I think you're seeing that they're getting a few targets off the line, but I think most people would say that they need to do more. And a lot of that is United are crap sellers. They're terrible at selling players. And I think that is pretty much the crux of the situation at the moment. But we'll see. One player might go. Dean Henderson may leave and be replaced by Fenerbahce goalkeeper Altay Bayindir. I don't know if I pronounced that properly. But seemed to be saying goodbye to the Fenerbahce fans earlier this week. There's been pictures of him before we recorded this podcast at the airport. Seems like that one is gonna happen. So maybe there's a chance to raise some cash for Dean Henderson, or are United going to fall back and have to settle for a loan with an option again?
Some of this I don't really understand. Like, okay, you do want your reserve goalkeeper in. There's always that chance Onana gets injured. And of course, you want Dean Henderson outdoor and have done for a long, long period of time. But there's needs must elsewhere on this football pitch, Scott. You know what I mean? I could not be less interested in this transfer. I really could not be, because you've got Heaton, and I think Heaton is a fine number 2 just to keep you going. And yeah, he's not your long-term option.
Injured or you go, at the moment.
Or what you're going to do, you go in the market and you're going to get your Dubravka. Yeah, you're going to get a player like that again, and that doesn't really help anyone, does it? Or you're going to go in the market and do your next Weghorst, aren't you? So this is what this smells like to me, is that you're going in that direction of trying to find guns for hire and bringing them in. And this is why I say I'd rather see kids. I would rather see that balance, because then you're at least accumulating knowledge. And over that time, can I just say one more thing about you talk about the goalkeeper, but I just want to say one more thing about Ten Hag. Last year, he did an interview with a load of us and said that he didn't want to exert a philosophy. He's a kind of man who likes to look at his squad and work what he has around his tactics. Now, we know that he wants to move United to a certain place. But do you know what now, Scott? He's going to have to get creative. Doesn't matter what your philosophy is. It doesn't matter if you're Pep Guardiola. You're still going to have to try things if it doesn't work. Jurgen Klopp has ripped his own philosophy up in the last 12 months because he's had to, because his players kind of dictate that. So that's where we are with the injuries now. But I don't know. What do you think about this new goalkeeper, Scott?
Something necessary. I mean, you see, if they can get 20 million for Dean Henderson, that helps you bring players in.
What's the price of the goalkeeper? Do we know anything more than that at the moment?
Of the new keeper?
Yeah.
Looking at about €7 million.
Yeah. So half of that's gone. So like Dean Henderson was a £30 million goalkeeper not so long ago, and is now a £15 million goalkeeper. And now you're going to lose half of that to sign another goalkeeper that sits on your bench. So there's I get why they need it, but there are other positions still. I think you do need players. We're still waiting for our striker, obviously, to come back, who is not anywhere close to being a striker, and therefore you're playing your best left-sided forward as your striker. So do you see what I mean? This is unfortunately, I didn't want this show to be completely like this, but that's where we are, isn't it? Is that United are going into this game against Forest, and they're going to struggle to really put what you would call a bona fide first team out.
I think the squad is slightly deeper than it was last season. You think Christian Eriksen in reserve, is what you were working with last season. I mean, the fact that Malacia is injured as well as Shaw is means that you don't have your second choice left back, and that is he's got a muscular injury as well, and has been out since the start of pre-season with that.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the situation that United are in. Whether they look to the loan market to bring a loan player in, we'll wait and see. They obviously need another midfielder. I think they probably need two midfielders, really, because Donny van de Beek needs to leave. If he does, we wait and see. I'm not sure. That move is on ice at the moment, as far as I understand it. And then obviously you've got the striker situation as well. What will he do up front? Because Forest are going to visit Old Trafford. You'll be there, as you said. Anthony getting a lot of stick at the moment. Calls for Pellistri to start. And what do you do through the middle?
Yeah, he won't start Pellistri. He just won't. Because again, we talk about this manager and young players. Like, I don't think he's going to start Pellistri over senior players. That's the way I look at it. I think Pellistri would come off the bench, but we're obviously still hearing that Pellistri still might go out the door on loan. I think, Scott, what he's going to do against Forest, this is my little prediction. We'll put it up there. I think he'll play 4-2-3-1. I think he'll play at the base of the two will be Casemiro and Eriksen, and I think he'll play Bruno on the right. So I think that's what he'll do. Rashford will go back to the left, and I think you probably start Martial. So I think that's the way to keep the senior players and pieces on the pitch.
So you start McTominay as well?
In a 4-2-3-1? No.
Well, you said Bruno on the right, so he plays in the middle.
Well, yeah, exactly. You can either play Bruno on the right, or you can play Bruno at 10 and play Anthony on the right. I don't think he's going to play Pellistri. Like, we're debating here about how good youngsters are, and yet we've got a big hole at left back, and we're not picking. We don't want the left back youngster to play, but yet Pellistri, who has played some good minutes, hasn't he? I don't think he's ready for Premier League starts as it stands. When you've got an £80 million winger who probably, all right, shouldn't be worth £80 million, but still does better off-ball work than Pellistri. It's just truth.
I think what I've seen this week is the brief cameos that we've seen of Pellistri this season have been obviously
good.
Garnacho on the left wants to cut inside. Anthony wants to cut inside, slows up attacks. Whereas Pellistri is right-footed on the right, gets to the byline. That's how United conceded a goal last week, was when Kulusevski got the byline and cut it back. Just a different option, really. Something to stop United being so predictable. I don't see it happening either, but I think that's some noise that I've seen in the fan base, and especially when you're talking about loaning him out as well. It makes you very predictable if you have a left-footed right winger, really.
Yeah, look, no, I totally agree with you. And again, when we talked about Ten Hag's philosophy, we know that with Anthony, that's why he bought that player, because he wants a left-footed, right-sided winger. That's what he wanted, to be able to cut in and invert. And unfortunately, that's kind of all Anthony does do on the ball, isn't it? Is cut in and invert. He doesn't really have a lot more of a rounded game. The manager obviously challenged him a few weeks ago and said that he needs to kind of be more productive and do different things. But like, that's an existing member of the team. Like, we're now looking at other parts of the pitch and going, right, how do you make the balance work again? And I think all you can do, Scott, is because when injuries happen and you don't have a plan B, you just have to go back to things that players know. And this set of players, most of the squad know 4-2-3-1. And you're going to have to find a way to protect Christian Eriksen on the run, while also looking after Casemiro on the run. So it's going to mean that Bruno Fernandes plays different positions again, 10 wide. You might, not seen Bruno play false 9. That might have been a help in these early parts of the season, but it's not something the manager wanted to do. Jadon Sancho might come back into the team just by needs must again. But that would be in a wide position where you've got options. And I think Marcus Rashford at some point has to go wide again. But is this the game? Probably not. Probably now the manager thinks, well, Can Martial hack an hour for me, or do at least 45 minutes for me? We don't know that either, do we? So it's just all these variables, really, that I think can happen, but it's difficult. He's got a tough job, but I think they haven't made it easy on themselves, have they?
Any final thoughts for today's show, Rob?
You should have signed Amrabat weeks ago.
With what money?
With the money that you sold Scott McTominay for 25 million, rather than sitting on him. You could have done that business. It was there. So I think for United, again, is that it is the story of ineptitude in the transfer market, of not being able to get things done. Not saying that when you get injuries that new signings are always the right thing, but now in the last 7 days of the window, they are going into the guns for hire market. And I think we will see that they will either make those transfers with allegedly having no money, Scott. Suddenly these transfers will come out of some pot of money, because that's football, or they'll bring in players on loan. And I think that's probably the more likely option. It will be some wild one we've not even spoken about in 2 or 3 days' time about, oh, this person's available and, they can do 6 months at left back. Let's try that player. But it's not a great strategy. And again, it's just very Manchester United.
Yes, an early promising transfer window where all 3 players that they signed were arriving before the start of the season, as I slowly descended into a bit of chaos, to be honest, because 2 of those 3 signings are injured. And United were planning on, obviously, offloading some squad players that they have, and they failed to do so, or failed to offload anyone of note, really, at the moment. Talking about youth players, there's a few players leaving for sub £1 million. Not going to make much of a difference to what you can do on the incomings front. But anyway, United play Forest on Saturday, and that is at Old Trafford. They will be looking for their 2nd win of the season. Could we maybe see, after the 2nd game of the season, in the 2nd consecutive year, an abandonment of a style from Erik Ten Hag, just hoping that he can get through the next coming weeks and months, given things are not working on the pitch at the moment. Anyway, subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. I didn't even say this at the start of the show. Subscribe wherever you get your pods and watch us on YouTube, the Promise and the Manchester United podcast. Like the video, subscribe, leave a comment for us, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a show. We do Tuesdays and Fridays. That may change in season with United back in. Oh, God, United are back in the Champions League. Oh, okay. Follow us on social media too, at @Scott Saunders on X, IG, and TikTok, at _Rob_B on YouTube and Twitter, and at Promise and MU as well on the socials. So see you soon. Thanks again, Rob. Thanks for listening, everyone. Let's hope United get the business or get the job done against Forest. Rob's crossing his fingers. So yeah, I think we're at that point already. Depressing, isn't it? Really.
3 games in.
3 games in. See you soon, everyone. Next week we will be back. Thank you.